not joking. There are literally like 8 motorcycles over there. So it's like whenever I come here, I'm just saying like, we would have loved for some folks to come down just to check it out. Actually, one of the last videos I saw was the Hayabusa motorcycle, which I don't know if you're a kid from just the 80s, 90s, you know the Busa and how the reputation it has. So yeah, that YouTube channel, if you what is it, Repzilla YouTube or is it Repzilla? Yeah, definitely check out the Repzilla YouTube channel because you're gonna see stuff you're gonna be like, oh my god, this is so very cool. So thank you so much for hosting us, Russ. So hi everyone, like I mentioned, I'm Len, and we also got on the line Jay. Hey Jay, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, sure. Hi, nice to meet everyone. My name's Jay, customer engineer, focused in analytics. Did we lose you, Len? Or I think you might have went on mute.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There we go. Yeah, we finally slowly figuring out the audio video session. So let me put up our. So the way this works is that we're gonna talk a little bit about BigQuery. So for those of you guys who don't know, if you're on the call, go ahead and give us your email addresses if you haven't registered for the event, because otherwise we can actually go in and add you to the hands-on lab. So there are actually some labs involved in this, and most of the time here today we're actually going to spend going through the labs with you guys, and I'll actually walk you through the labs as we're going through. It's a really fun lab. It can take you anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on which part of the stuff you do. So don't be scared when you see the 3-hour time thing when you start the labs. But it's a great opportunity to get hands-on with it, and now we'll have some sort of experts. I guess Jay is more of an expert than me though, since he's a certified data person. I just pretend to be one for the daytime. So like I said, if you didn't register on the website, you definitely want to post your email address in the chat room for the meeting, and I can go ahead and add you to that meeting, add you to the folks who have access to the event. So let me go ahead and then flip our slides so we can talk about BigQuery and what we're talking about here today. So while I'm setting up, anyone have any overall questions about what we're trying to do today about Google Cloud or BigQuery? I mean, I guess first we could start out by, I guess, raise hands. How many folks here have actually used BigQuery before today? Awesome. That's pretty cool. I'm seeing a lot of folks here, and folks, and of the folks who've used BigQuery, how many of you have actually used BigQuery ML or the machine learning capabilities that are built into BigQuery? So weird question, how many folks even know that existed? Yeah, seriously, it's actually, I wouldn't say it's one of the lesser known things, but it's actually one of those things that, you know, we could definitely talk a lot more about it. And actually, that's some of the stuff I'm going to talk about to get started. So if there's no overall questions or anything like that, I'll just jump right in and talk about BigQuery. So if you don't know what BigQuery is, I guess it's our enterprise data warehouse solution from Google Cloud. It's our premier product for data warehouse. Like a lot of things from Google, I've gotten used to this now, being at Google for a few years. Pretty much all the big products at Google start out with some sort of research paper, which is a very interesting way for products to get started. So there is a very much a BigQuery paper, and if you don't know much about the NoSQL and about this whole space of products, you'll know that a lot of products came out of that paper. BigQuery just happens to be the one that Google is working on. So it's a fully managed serverless, and it's like from the get-go was a serverless platform. It's pretty unique in some of the capabilities and what stuff they're using it for. It's exabyte scale. In fact, I forgot that they gave us a couple days last week. They mentioned like a statistic on how many queries are actually put through BigQuery daily, and it is quite ridiculous the volume of queries that are put through. The other things about BigQuery is that it's encrypted, it's highly available, it's durable by design. Um, One of the things about a lot of the Google products you will hear about is that they were built for distributed from the get-go, and that's just because from the beginning of Google, things were always planned to be distributed. So there are no simple solutions for anything at Google. Things are designed to be planet scale, and a similar thing for BigQuery. The other thing that's really cool about BigQuery is that you can do some very high-speed queries on very large data sets. I mean, high volume data sets with very low latency query. And it's something that, it's something that you'll kind of touch upon when you work in this lab as well. The other thing that's really good is that it's very popular for real-time insights for streaming data. That's actually one of the big use cases for BigQuery. So, here's some of the queries, some of the statistics they are able to talk about, right? So there's one customer that has 250 petabytes of data. That is a tremendous amount of data. I think I saw one statistic that the Library of Congress is definitely just barely petabyte scale. So for one customer already have like 250 times that is pretty spectacular. And then there's customers that are running 5 petabytes scale queries, which is also pretty outstanding. These statistics have actually really changed because every day more data, more queries. So at a high level, it's a fully managed service. So this is not something where you're going to have to spin up servers or actually have to worry about it. Think about that. It's serverless. So that's another thing you don't have to think about. Oh, I have to scale up, scale down, or anything like that. It takes care of that for itself. It supports streaming ingestion is one of the things about that. I mean, there are certain patterns you have to apply when doing something like streaming ingest for BigQuery, but it does support that. It also provides free bulk loading. Actually, that's actually one of the very popular things that folks use it, particularly for customers who do things like ads. So if you do things like from one of the ad vendors and then trying to get that stuff inside of BigQuery, but the free bulk loading thing is a huge advantage. And I've actually worked with several customers on that capability just because it's such a differentiator for the product. It has a distributed memory in terms of how it actually does the query. Now, there's so much more detailed presentations on, for example, the distributed memory module functionality for BigQuery that I can, if you're interested, you can go out there and Google it. But it's a very interesting technology. It's very it was pretty much very much ahead of its time, and it's still very much ahead of where a lot of competing products are. The other cool thing about it is it's SQL compliant. It has a REST API. There is a web UI, CLI. There's client libraries for a bunch of different languages that you can do. So depending on what type of programming you're trying to do, you more than likely will be able to find something that supports it for things like object mapping, things like loading libraries, all sorts of stuff. And then there's very good integration with a lot of other services as well. So BigQuery ML. So the challenge that BigQuery ML was designed to deal with, right, was the fact that the whole process of coming up with machine learning and making models, training models, and then doing inference of models was not very easy for a lot of folks. And in fact, it's actually a huge barrier to entry for the use of machine learning. I know nowadays every middle schooler is writing their paper with ChatGPT, but if you imagine 2 years ago, if you said to the average person who was working with a lot of data, are you able to do a machine learning model to be able to figure out even simple things like customer sentiment, or hey, can you categorize these things, and you can't fit them in a straightforward programming language. It was a barrier to entry, right? And so if you're trying to do training, if you're trying to leverage models that are state of the art, you're trying to do things like batch predictions, it would literally require extensive data science training. It would literally require you to be able to set up things, and then forget about things like security and compliance, because just being able to spin up things, I know that a lot of folks first, when they get started, they spin up Jupyter notebooks, they spin up things for doing training, they capture data from lots of places, they go out to a lot of these popular websites and they go, okay, I'm gonna download this model, I'm gonna do this thing with TensorFlow, I'm gonna do this thing with whatever, and it's literally like held together with glue and a dream. And so it was not necessarily the most straightforward thing. So worrying about even things like security and compliance, which if you think about it now, something like security and compliance is even more important than it ever was when it comes to machine learning, because there is nothing worse than finding out that you're leaking sensitive data. In fact, it's actually funny. I won't mention the vendor, but one of the vendors who worked on their own generative AI platform for generating coding, they actually had to pull back their platform because what had happened was that the platform was actually leaking their internal source code. So it's security and compliance is a big deal, and so the fact that for folks to get started, it was such a huge barrier to entry. This is actually some of the stuff that we were targeting for BigQuery ML. And so we understand that there's a lot of challenges to making use of it. And the other challenge too is that it's even hard to find people to do it. And then the amount of time it takes to be able to set up data pipelines and the multiple tools. I mean, I've had to work with lots of smart people who've gotten really good at doing things like Jupyter notebooks and making use of libraries and modules, but I know it's not the easiest thing to get started. And I know that finding people who know this really well are expensive as well. And so this is one of the reasons why we targeted BigQuery ML. We wanted folks to be able to do ML initiatives without moving data from BigQuery, and then also be able to use models using SQL. I mean, that was actually one of the big reasons why this thing came up. Was the idea was, hey, what if people could do things with models using just SQL? SQL is a very well-known language. There's folks who are very comfortable in it. And then also the thing is that we want to automate common ML tasks, such as training, such as testing, and then running inference. We want to make that as much automated as possible. And then also, quite frankly, we want to be able to take care of a lot of the infrastructure, security, and compliance that made you comfortable using it. And one of the things I want to highlight, and this is kind of like an overall Google thing for our AI push, is that there's a lot of products out there that are making use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. But how many vendors do you talk to from the initial conversation mention security, compliance? You know, that's really a differentiator. It's a reflection of the fact that our platform has been doing these things for quite a long time. And so we've dealt with lots of customer problems. We've actually dealt with a lot of problems for ourselves. So that's why you hear the focus on these things, because it's a long track record of doing this. So some of the supported models, we support a lot of models that you can make use of, and you can actually make use of custom models. I'll talk about a little bit about that later. You can actually do imports of models from AutoML. But classification, there's a whole set of models that are available for classification, stuff like regression, classifiers, boosted trees, AutoML tables. We also support a bunch of different regressions, linear regression, boosted trees using XGBoost. We also support k-means clusterings, time series forecasting. That time series one is really popular. It's really helpful, especially when doing stuff like looking at customer patterns. This time series makes it. Recommendation is also a good one using matrix factorization. I'm no AI ML expert, but I've worked with plenty of customers who've worked on similar problems like this. And so these types of models cover a lot of the use cases that folks would need to with BQML. And like I mentioned, you can actually import models to make use of in BQML. So it's not that you're limited to the type of things you can do. And then the big picture of this is, at the end of the day, being able to have infrastructure to run your machine learning, have a way to do things like training, importing models, and then also being able to run inference using SQL. That's really the big picture for why we do it. So I won't talk too much about the AutoML tables. So some of the AutoML tables is the idea behind it is you start with some of your raw tabular data, and then you use from that to be able to do types of typical use cases that folks use machine learning for. One of them is demand forecasting, essentially figuring out things like, hey, these are the types of products that we sold over the last 6 months. Based off of that, how can we figure out what are the types of products that we should invest in over the next 3 to 6 months? Price optimizations, things like figuring out stock out predictions. There's a lot of different use cases that you can achieve with AutoML tables. And like I said, that's one of the built-in types of models. And then you can, the big thing to remember about the BQML is that you can do this against your data inside of BigQuery. So if you have lots of transactional data that you've imported into your data warehouse, pricing data, and then all sorts of data like ads, like what we're talking about today, you can then use that to be able to run models to do things like figure out what customers are going to be wanting to buy 6 months from now, which is not necessarily an easy problem. And I know Having talked to a lot of customers, I know folks have tons and tons of spreadsheets that they use that they say, here's the last 6 months of SKUs that we've used. And that's one way of figuring it out, but I think it's probably a lot better to use predictive analytics to be able to figure some of that stuff out. And so what this looks like, and so this is literally the type of SQL syntax you're looking at to be able to set up a model. And then the following part of it also is is what we would actually do to actually run the prediction. And this stuff is a big deal. I mean, when you think about it, being able to use SQL queries to be able to instantiate a model, train a model, and then actually run inference on it, that is huge. Because as folks who've actually had to write their own in terms of doing machine learning, there's a lot underneath this, right? First, you have to get your data in a certain way. Then you have to figure out how you're going to use your modules, which libraries you're going to use, what infrastructure you're going to run those libraries on. Then make sure that you have a mechanism to be able to interact with the libraries so that you can do things like training. And then make sure you set up infrastructure so you can run inference. And then all of these things require, I mean, as you know, there's a reason why there's a GPU shortage right now, because there's a tremendous amount of hardware that's necessary to be able to do things like training for machine learning. So just being able to rely on some other infrastructure for you to be able to do this is actually a huge bonus for this. And in fact, you know, if you're able to fit your use case for machine learning using something like BQML, it could be a huge differentiator for you from other folks who are trying to take care of that completely for themselves. So some of the typical use cases for this is product recommendations, things like for retail, customer segmentation for marketing analytics, propensity for purchasing. And that's actually, so for some of the labs, these are some of the use cases that are actually in the labs that we're working on, by the way. So for logistics, delivery time estimation, predictive maintenance, and oh, by the way, you're able to make use of geo data inside a lot of these queries as well. And so that just becomes another source of data. So there are some models that make use of that information. For financial services, long-term value for customer is one of those use cases. And a lot of the BQML, because a lot of customers have been using this, it meets a lot of different business use cases. The idea behind it is that if there's a model that makes sense that's in BigQuery, you can likely use it to be able to do a lot of industry use cases. And so we also have lots of white papers and customer references for some of these use cases as well. So the audience segmentation one and recommendation is a really powerful one. And this is actually one of the ones that you can actually make use of in this lab. And the idea behind it is that you've got all these different sources of your ads data, whether it's transactional data, ads data from different vendors, your transactional website traffic data. You put those inside of BigQuery, and then you'll be able to use BigQuery ML to give you an overall view of what your customers are doing, right? The idea is that you could be able to see what paths are your customers being able to travel through your application. What's the likelihood that the customer is going to be able to make a specific purchase? What's the categorization that you can do for different types of customers? So it's a fairly powerful set of capabilities. And like I said, these are built-in models. K-means clustering is another model that you can make use of. And it's really good for being able to do some things like recommendations. So the idea behind that is if you've got a pretty good amount of data on customer patterns, like for example, the past things that customers looked at on your website, past purchases from that customer, and then also things like, you can also input things like, for example, that customer categories, visits, typical visits through your website is. You can then use that to be able to come up with a recommendation. That can all serve as input to recommendation. The one thing I want to highlight is your data doesn't have to be completely 100% filled out to be able to make use of this, because when you first get started on this journey for predictive marketing, you're not going to start out with the best data. But as you improve your data over time, it'll make a lot of these things like recommendations far more accurate. So if you start out just using the customer travel through your current website without, say, for example, looking at categorizations for customers, you're still able to make use of this. It's just that over time, the more data you give the models, the more accurate it's going to be and the better the recommendations will be. And so this is our remarketing prediction, which is one you can use for predict return buyers from Google Analytics data. And it shows like the way you create the model and then how you actually run the inference. And you'll be able, as part of these labs, you'll actually be able to execute queries like this against BQML directly. So that's one of the things that you can look forward to. So let's talk about kind of like the overall architecture for what BQML looks like, and at least for the description of the platforms that you'll be using for the hands-on labs. So in this lab, we're using GA360 as the source of ads, and then we use a feature called BigQuery Export. There's actually quite a lot of different ways you can actually get data into BigQuery, strangely enough. So BigQuery Export is one. And then what it essentially does is it imports it into BigQuery and then allows you to run predictions with them with BigQuery ML. And then you can visualize those predictions with a bunch of different tools, Looker Data Studio, Looker, and then since you can actually query the query BigQuery ML with a lot of different things, you could actually support a lot of different visualization with it, but the premier ones that it's pretty easy to find documentation on is Data Studio and Looker. So some of my slides are kind of missing some image. My apologies. So for compliance, the big picture is there's no infrastructure for you to manage, right? You can actually set up policies for your BigQuery data access so that you don't have to worry that your data is just available out there and you can make use of things. Also, the support for lots of different models that you can actually are actually trained. So all you have to do is run about inference on them. Supports a lot of different types of different models, and the prediction for all the models in BigQuery. And it also allows you to export the models as well, so you can do online prediction. If you're able to run it in some context, it can do online prediction. There's a much bigger story here for machine learning in Google Cloud. BigQuery ML is actually just one part of what we call our cloud AI platform. And as you may have heard, it has become a very popular thing right now. So the reason why I love BigQML is that I've been doing these labs for BigQuery ML for 2 years now. So this is actually old hat, and there's the fact that there's such a tremendous amount of interest now in our cloud AI platform. It's kind of interesting. You know, the big picture is that we've been doing things like this for a while. So customers can expect fairly mature platforms and fairly innovative stuff like BigQuery ML from us. The pricing actually for BigQuery is actually updated for this since then. We used to have this thing known as flat rates and slots. The thing about that is that is something that has changed. So we now do this thing what's known as editions. So we can talk, if you have any questions specifically about that, we can talk at length about it. But the idea behind it is that you can get started with BigQuery just going into BigQuery and making use of it. But then there's also different models for how you can actually, and then different capabilities, which we know as editions. So what that basically allows you to do is that certain types of queries that you may be executing and certain volume of queries have support different editions. So you can always get started. You can always go to the query of BigQuery and get started. But if you're making use of it as a production and making use of it at scale, you have to consider which editions you want to use to be able to support different types of capabilities. The great thing about BigQuery ML, though, this is the big takeaway to understand about it, is that it gives you a SQL interface to machine learning. That's really the heart of it. And then also the fact that you'll be able to do machine learning on your data already existing inside your data warehouse, which is huge. And then you don't have to spin up additional infrastructure for yourself to be able to support that. You know, for a data scientist, you can build your models. You don't have to spend time on ETL. You can do your experimentation directly inside of BigQuery, and then you can actually export your models to be able to do further tuning with them and import them back in. Right? Your data analysts can build models without knowledge of ML. I mean, that's really the big picture. And you know, I don't know how experienced all y'all are when you actually start using BigQuery, but you'll be able to do machine learning. You're going to be able to do it in these labs today. And you can make use of your domain knowledge and about your business, because that's the big picture, right? You guys understand your business. You understand what you're doing for this. You can focus on that and then make use of machine learning as a part of that. So You can do batch predictions, unstructured data. You can export your models to Cloud AI for online prediction. And you can actually do predictions using the BI dashboards through BigQuery or going through the console to be able to do predictions. So in terms of figuring out whether or not something fits AutoML tables versus BigQuery ML, they're kind of complementary. It's not really necessary for you to think of different problems. There's a bunch of different models that are available in BigQuery ML. SQL, but the big thing is BigQuery ML allows you to do a SQL interface, whereas there's a graphical UI for AutoML tables. AutoML tables is actually a model type of BigQuery ML. And the real thing is that it's much easier to get started with BigQuery ML than AutoML, but it's also possible to make use of AutoML inside of BigQuery ML. So in terms of comparing some of the different options that you have, and there's actually far more options that are presented here, but the main categorizations of them is that you can make use of BigQuery ML, which allows you to do SQL with BigQuery and unstructured data. You can use AutoML for all sorts of different problems, and then you can do custom deep learning modules yourself. And then, of course, we recently added some additional capabilities in this. And so there's a whole thing we could talk about for Cloud AI, but I guess that kind of fits under the custom deep learning module thing. But there's a lot of new feed services that we've launched to be able to allow you to do machine learning. It's just that BigQuery ML and AutoML are some of the older ones that we've had in here for a while. So BigQuery ML is really great if you're a data analyst and you really know how to manage your SQL data. And AutoML is for the more developer experience. Like I said, some of the custom ML packages, such as Vertex AI, that's for folks who are machine learning engineers who have that expertise or who are trying to fit into some sort of ML ops flow for themselves. Just to give you an idea of how quickly you can get started, BigQuery ML, as you guys are going to use it today inside of this lab, right? AutoML is a little longer startup time, right? And you'll have to have a little more understanding of the technology. And similar thing for the custom deep learning modules, even though we have a lot of features now that really do make this a lot easier. In fact, the generative AI app builder, for example, you literally could get started right away in doing some things with a chat interface with this machine learning. So BigQuery ML is really targeting folks who are spend most of their time writing SQL. AutoML, you're really doing a lot of things with waiting for your jobs to finish in terms of training and for inference. And then for custom deep learning modules, there's a lot of different use cases and a lot of different ways you can interact with that, but it's not going to be necessarily take as long as some of the writing SQL stuff. So the cloud computing cost for BigQuery ML is actually one of the lower ones. AutoML is a little more cost because exactly you'd be doing a lot more things with it. And then the custom deep learning ones depends on the stuff. We've got so many different things right now in our cloud AI platform. It's really hard to give one size fits all because it's very easy, for example, to do like a custom search engine using some of our tooling, for example. And then the accuracy, you can get fairly high accuracy with the BigQuery ML stuff, meaning that how you can improve how good the recommendations you're making, for example. AutoML, obviously, you're coding things to a specific type of accuracy, so you can get it wherever you want it to be. And then the custom deep learning modules, I think this is all over the map. I don't think we can make one general assessment about it because there's so many different capabilities across the field. But obviously, some of the chat interface stuff, it can get very customized. So it can actually get very good in terms of being able to do some of these things. So it's kind of hard to generalize it like that. So the big picture is in terms of where stuff fits, in terms of who makes use of it, in terms of use cases. The developer experience is more like AutoML, Cloud ML APIs, and also we've got a whole suite of things under the Vertex AI Planner that we call the Cloud AI Banner. The data analyst can definitely make use of the BigQuery ML, and that's also developers can make use of it as well because it actually, it does allow some customizations to the fact that you can actually import models. Data scientists would probably make use of some of the stuff in our Cloud AI platform, such as Vertex AI and some of our other new generative AI platforms. And so to get started in BigQuery and BigQuery ML, there's a really good course on Coursera. And we have a lot of different templates for how to solve specific types of problems. And that's another thing that hopefully you guys get a chance to try this out today or later today. There's actually some really good use cases that you can search for on using BigQuery ML for a lot of different use cases. So if you typical use cases, customer propensity, product, inventory predictions, all these other types of use cases. And we'll give you end-to-end descriptions, such as what type of input data you need to look like, and then also things like dashboards and also sample queries. So a lot of those are available because, like I said, lots of folks have been using these platforms for a long time on a massive scale. So there's plenty of prior art that can help you get started with an effort. You don't have to feel like you have to start with predictive analytics from zero. There's a lot of stuff that's already available, and actually we'll hope to demonstrate some of that stuff now today. So I want to hand it over to Jay so he can talk to us about some of the end-to-end use cases.
Yeah, thank you very much, Len. I appreciate it. Yeah, so that was an overview of BQML within BigQuery, and then what I'm going to tell you a little bit more about first, the end-to-end use case of some of these examples of how this could be used. And then I'm going to go over with you guys a little bit about what instant BQML is and how it's differentiated from the BQML versus instant BQML, because there is a difference in how that works. So if we can go to the next slide, I think some of these images might be kind of broken, but so just bear with us a little bit, and I'm going to have to switch here in a little bit. But if we were to give you like a really quick potential use case would be that, when you're giving any kind of incentives, marketing, any type of coupons, etc. Let's say in the case of like bananas as an example, or like avocados, you like look at it 1 minute and the next minute it's like super dark and then green, and then next thing you know it's like super dark and then like it's all mushy inside out of like 1 or 2 days, right? Or even like bananas, they're like, whoa, what just happened? But yeah, like they need to be sold quickly, and in order to get those moving, or some of those products have been sitting there even within your inventory, you want to move those quickly, right? And how do you identify those customers, and how do you understand your inventory and match the needs of the customers to do these things and to strike that fine balance? And so this is going to be one of the use cases to really do that, but at the same time drive revenue, and to drive sales, to understand your customers, their buying behaviors, what's going to make them tick, to really move that inventory, and then also adjust your inventory as well accordingly. So if you go to the next slide, so this basically what you can do is create a model, right directly into BigQuery, as Len went over, and you can do that all using SQL statements. And are you guys comfortable with SQL statements, by the way? Just kind of show of hands or head nods. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it makes it really simple to do, right? Because you go in there, you don't have to go into your Python notebook or write everything in Python, unless you love writing Python and you're a Python expert. That's great. But the good part about this is that you're not leaving BigQuery. You're doing everything there. You're doing it with SQL statements. The data doesn't move anywhere. You're not creating another data store and going through that entire process. You're doing everything within BigQuery if you're comfortable with that and you're used to using that. And then you can also do a little bit of feature engineering as well directly in there, right? If you're comfortable doing some of that stuff directly in SQL statements, and then run it, right? As you can see here, basically you're updating some of the feature, the names, the column names, so that you can identify a little bit better. And then you're able to identify what the target it's going to be. And you're creating all these input labels, right, for that banana example that I was telling you earlier. So it's doing all this stuff, and then and this also, you can join the data, etc. And then from here you can really just create your initial data sets. And then if you can go to the next slide here. Well, oh, okay, this one completely is not showing at all, so apologize, guys. But you'll be able to see this in the actual example. But after you create the model within BigQuery, it'll run the model. It'll let you know when it's done, and then you can evaluate the model directly from there as well. And I can show you some examples here in a little bit of kind of like what that could potentially look like. And then we can go to the next slide here. Let's see what's. So basically, directly from there, after you trained your models, etc., you created your data set, all that, and then you can also even ask analytical questions, right? So who do we send this coupons to? Can we find people that actually fits this criteria of this classification of these groups of people that meet this customer segment that we want to send out this type of incentive to? And I think, that's another powerful step, is that it doesn't really end just by, okay, now you've trained the model, and now from there, you may be able to run inference on it using our inference engine, or maybe you're running that through MLOps and Vertex AI, because you can register that model within Vertex and then run inference through there. Or, but you can also from here, not leaving BigQuery from all one platform, doing the end-to-end machine learning, but you can also find out who are the customers that you should really contact after getting the results and the inference, right? So that you're able to narrow down and actually take action versus just having a model or just some numbers. And I think that's what's really important, especially if you're trying to do marketing or even push that information back out to, let's say, to like an email marketing campaign that could be a little bit more personalized with the right incentives, based on their propensity to buy, based on their user behavior, by actually understanding them and segmenting them, or should you even write a message to them at all, right? Like those are the things that you can really identify directly off from there, as long as you have the right data and everything in place. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. I believe we're talking about predictive analytics. I think what the best here to do, Len, if it's okay, I think some of the images are broken. Is it okay if I share my screen? Is that okay with you, Len?
No problem.
Okay, great. All right, so let me go ahead and, all right, so we, Len, went over BigQML, and the great part about BigQML. So I'm gonna go over with you guys what instant BigQML is. So BigQML is great in that it enables data analysts who are proficient in SQL, who are comfortable in BigQuery, and you want to stay in BigQuery, and you want to do machine learning models that are quick, easy, and modifiable as well, right? Because you can still do efficient engineering. There's actually even explainability in BigQML as well, so it can tell you like the feature importance and kind of the weights of that model. But instant BigQML takes it to another level, because it will allow anyone to be basically kind of like a data scientist, because as long as you can fill out a form, you can do BigQML, right? It's like instant noodles. You just literally tear the package and pour some water in, boom, you're good to go, ready to eat it. So like, this is what instant BigQML is, and that's what the lab that we have today with you guys, that you guys signed up for in Quick Labs, that's what we're doing, is the instant BigQML piece of it. So basically, why people might invest in something like advanced predictive analytics in terms of marketing analytics is because, for the first thing here is not all customers are the same, right? And it's getting very competitive, especially with the macroeconomic conditions, with the things that they are. It pays to be competitive, and to be competitive, you got to really understand your customers, right? I think we have some people from Revzilla here, right? You guys are selling like motorcycle gear and things like that, and for them, like, it's like you truly have to understand who I am, right? Like what I like and my style and taste, and what do I ride on? Like even brand loyalty is very strong there in terms of that. So like understanding that will be able to help you really optimize and maximize your revenue, because the more you understand me, the better incentives you're going to send me, and you're not going to fill my inbox with spam and then kind of lose credibility from me if you're just sending me random things. And then next thing you know, you're going to end up in the spam, or your incentive is not going to make sense to me. I'm not going to take any action. And then after that, you just tune out, right? And you just become noise at that point. The other part is, with the whole third-party tracking blocking that's happening here with like Safari and Apple, that's been prominent lately. It's good to really start moving to more of a first-party data strategy, right? And that's what's going to be very, very important moving forward. Is because now you have the ability to collect the data, you have the technology, even through like Google Cloud, to be able to supplement some of that research on your end, and to take that first-party data, and you have all this, and then you can mix that even like web analytics data with your CRM data, ad data, your inventory data, whatever the case may be, all together in BigQuery, and then actually take the right actions. That's going to most benefit your operations in terms of supply chain, et cetera, too. So, but the overall goal with it all of this is to create the business value, right? And we're not just doing this just to do it because it's cool or because you can do it. It should really answer some deep questions and create business value. But the way to do that is truly understand your customers, do it effectively, efficiently, fast, and then also send out the relevant information or post the right personalization abilities within the website. So that's what it really comes down to, right? And moving towards that first-party data strategy is going to be very key and important. So Instant BigQML, as I told you guys, literally writing a form. This is what it looks like. When we go into the lab, you're going to be able to see this, and it's going to tell you. Obviously, it's not just as simple as just literally writing out a web form. There's going to be some steps that you're going to have to do, but overall, it makes it pretty easy so that even someone who may not be as technical can go in there and do all this and build their own pipelines, basically. Well, actually, it builds a pipeline for you, and then you can just deploy it on a software called CR Mint that can run on App Engine or Cloud Run, but we definitely recommend running it on App Engine, and then it's just literally following the directions that appears on our Instant BigQML. Obviously, it's not going to have all the machine learning models and capabilities that like Len told you guys about earlier, especially with like time series forecasting and like multivariate time series forecasting, which was recently added as well. Like those things aren't going to be as available. This is very, very marketing focused because it's basically streaming in all the data directly from your Google Analytics data for your website data, and then creating a model using that information specifically, right? But you get ownership of that model. You can export that model, or you can use that as a part of a pipeline to start off the initial part of your machine learning journey, and then take the output to be able to do additional learnings, et cetera, and kind of create that chain and pipeline. So a lot of things that you can really do, but you'll be able to see a little bit more of that and how that works within Instant BigQML in the lab. And it's something that could be good to kind of enable people within your teams, maybe someone in like marketing department that may not be as technical, and I'm not stereotyping and saying marketing people aren't technical, but typically that can be the case, right? And you can just give them a quick enablement and be like, hey, just follow these instructions and you can build your own machine learning model. It's like you're really empowering and enabling people within the organization, and it helps them to buy into the whole, I think, the data first strategy and bringing that data culture, because they don't feel as threatened, I guess. And then now they're like, what else can we do, right? Like, and it gets them excited. So I think it is important. But ultimately, what it does is really for you to be able to do this quickly, at speed, and have the flexibility to be able to do all these things, because it lives in BigQuery. You can export the model, you can do what you need to do with it, and ultimately definitely gives you the control because you own that code, right? We definitely believe in more of an open approach, so that you can take export it out of the container and take it with you. In some cases, most cases, it's like a TensorFlow model, but there's other frameworks that gets added in there as well. So, but it comes with all the the libraries and dependencies that you may need. So definitely what's going to really matter is going to be where you're on this marketing strategy journey too, right? Because one, you definitely have to kind of follow that CRISP-DM process of like identifying what your business goals are, what do you need to accomplish, and then do you have the right data in place? So like Google Analytics data, are you going to stream that data into your BigQuery instance, or are you going to batch load it? How are you going to use that data? Are you going to combine it with ads or YouTube data or your website data, other pieces of first-party data, information, CRM data, all that information, so that you can create this custom learning, machine learning. And this is kind of where Instant BigQML gets you to, right? To do it easier. And then ultimately where you want to be is to kind of have those micro moments and multi moments throughout your website, as well as your other marketing strategies as well. I kind of alluded to the fact that you don't get all the models within Instant BQML, but you still get a pretty good amount. And these are the ones that I think that we've identified, and we're continuing to add to it and make it more useful for our end users. But ones that we've identified that can be pretty good are going to be using Google Analytics data, are going to be like the propensity models typically, right? So purchase propensity, is this person, can you classify someone into a certain group to say, what is the likelihood of this person that's going to buy? Obviously, you're going to need some historical data, and you're going to have a little bit of kind of like labeling to Essence too, to kind of understand that even more, so you can kind of continue to iterate and understand, like, did this actually work out? Did this actually happen or not? And kind of continue to learn and iterate on your model, which you can do. But yeah, and then also identifying users based on their journey within Google Analytics, like, well, is this person's behavior, like the pages that they visited or the bounce rates or whatever the case may be that you're looking at, or certain events that might have triggered off, is this person more like, is this going to a person buy again, right? And then using that information, you can add additional layers within certain specific web pages that you've identified and say, yep, this is the path that they take. And on this web page, they're more likely to repeat that purchase for this specific customer. That's a personalization approach for this specific segment or group of people, and have a click-through link or an action item or call to action directly on there, et cetera. And then product propensity, I think this is something that's really great in terms of, like, if you have like a loyalty program, that people can sign up for, and it's like, which group is more likely to do that? And if they haven't done that, why not, right? Like, reach out to them. Maybe that calls for an email marketing campaign to say, hey, join us, our loyalty program. Here are the incentives, and things like that. And they might be more likely to incline to respond and actually register for that. But yeah, as you kind of get the idea, right? You get all this information, you can kind of get the destination propensity, event propensity, like, what are they more likely to do? Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it, but at least you'll have a higher probability that they will. And that means that the message that you send out and all the efforts that you put into creating that creative or implementing those strategies within your website, personalization, whatever the case may be, is actually going to see a better return on investment versus where you just go in blind and just kind of, just spray it everywhere, right? Back in the day, email marketing, I remember I would hear all the time, yeah, just blast, email blast everyone. And I remember that happening way back in the day. And so, but yeah, so anyway, definitely a lot more targeted. So obviously there's Google Analytics 360 and then Google Analytics 4. In June or July, is it? We're gonna completely sunset and then go complete to GA4. So, yeah, all that stuff is there as well. Same things, same models. Here's some use cases. I think we went over it earlier today, but and we can share some of this information if you like. This is like Blue Nile that did something like this to understand kind of purchase propensity and to understand what their behaviors are like, certain people who are more likely to buy, and when they go to the checkout, and when they add it to their carts, etc. Why didn't they finish that cart? Things like that, and to be able to convert them. Dyson is another one, to be able to understand like repeat buyers and who are more likely to repeat, so you can continue that customer loyalty and get them to come back, especially thinking about like frequency and recency type of approach, where it's like, well, this person hasn't been back in a little while and now they're coming back, right? That you might have that information and to be able to identify that as well. So but I think you guys get the idea of all these. So let me go ahead and stop there. Did we land, Len, did you want to take like a quick break before we go into the lab? What are your thoughts?
I think maybe we can stop for a second to see if there's any overall questions.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Then I guess we could say that we'll get started with the labs in like 4 or 5 minutes at 1:30 to get started with the labs. So are there any overall questions? I know we covered a lot of stuff in those slides. Are there any questions about any of that stuff?
I think probably most of the questions I might have will come up in the labs anyway, so I figured we'll wait till we get there.
Okay. All right. So I guess we can take a few minutes. In fact, let's make it longer than that. Let's say in about 10 minutes then. And my time, it's 1:37. We can get started. Do you still want to go over some more slides, Jay, or did you want us to transition to the labs?
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, if there was any one thing that I did want to quickly mention, is I don't know if you guys, if anyone here uses Looker or have heard of Looker, which is a BI platform. But there's all these like Looker blocks, which are like free code that you can use. But now we have a tighter integration with BQML directly within Looker, where you can actually create a model using the interface. And then you can say regression or classification, pick out the data sources and pick out your features. There's the feature selection there directly. And then, get your results and run inference directly in here as well. So just wanted to note that that's out there. If anyone is using Looker, that it's free and available if you want to start on that. Okay, I'll pause there. And then take a 5-minute break. Is that what you said, or 10? Sorry.
Yeah, let's do a 10-minute break, and then if you folks, if you're on a call and you still haven't pasted your email address or you didn't register at our registration page, give me your email address so I can give you access to the labs. And then you should, once you've gained access to the labs, you should be able to. It'll probably prompt you to register if you've not registered on the Quick Lab site. But once you do, you'll be able to access the labs. And I saw that a couple of y'all have already registered, which is awesome. So if you have not pasted your email address or registered on the site, please paste your email address in the chat windows. And then we'll get started, let's say at 1:40 my time, or in about 10 minutes, okay? Thank you guys so much. We'll be back on again. But I'll be here to answer any questions or anything like that. So if you guys have any other questions, I can answer them.
Sounds great.
Hey, folks, about another minute, we'll start up again. So if y'all are heading, we'll start up again in about another minute.
Sounds good.
Hey, Len, did you want to drive, or am I driving this? Wasn't sure.
No, I think I'm driving because I'm going
Cool.
through the labs and showing everyone how to use everything.
Perfect.
Man,
Thank you.
thanks for the dedication, man. Appreciate it. All right, folks. So hopefully everyone's back now. So let me go ahead and get started into, hopefully you're in the environment. So if you click on this link that I gave in the chat window, that's a link to the actual lab content. And so let me show you, you should see something similar to this. So anyone who is not seeing something similar to what's on my screen right now, just let me know so we can figure out what needs to happen. But I've registered the 9 folks who were 9 email addresses that I had from the attendees, and for that, they were put in the chat window. So let me know if you're not able to see the screen that I'm having. So let me give you guys a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to pull this up. And if you don't have it, just raise your hands and we'll try to figure out how to get you into this environment. So I've spun up this quick lab environment. It's going to be available for till next week, basically. So you'll be able to access these labs and run through these labs either today with us here or anytime over the weekend. Yes, you will need to register an account. When you click on that link, it'll prompt you for registering an account. So let me give another 2 minutes or so. All right, folks. So, yeah. So, like I said, let me know if you have any problems getting into the lab environment. So, so I know it's kind of scary when you see it says 3 hours. It doesn't necessarily have to take 3 hours, but you have a lot of time to run this once you click. So the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and click Start Labs. And then that is going to set up an environment for you to be able to run these. I highly recommend opening this console in incognito mode. And the reason for that is that it's going to try to use the login that you have currently for your main browser window. So if you have your Google Cloud project already logged in, it's going to try to use that. So you want to use the incognito mode like you saw me do just now, where I just go open incognito. And then you'll copy over the password from this, and then it'll take you to a window that looks like this. Make sure that you can see it, and you can paste the password. You understand, because this is actually a new account that was created for you to run the labs in. And then you'll have to accept our terms of service. So this is a free environment that's provided to you to run these labs in. So you don't have to enter any payment information or anything like that. You'll jump directly into the labs. So the way the lab documentation works, it actually kind of goes over some of the points several times, but the high level objectives for the labs is that you're going to deploy an open source data platform on Google Cloud. And what that means is that you're going to be able to pull data. You're going to use one of our ads accounts, actually, for one of our demo ads accounts for it. And then it'll pull that into your BigQuery environment in this lab environment. And then you're going to be able to do modeling on that data using BigQuery ML. And you'll be able to do, depending on which choice you pick in terms of a direction, there's a bunch of different directions. There's a bunch of different choices for directions in terms of how you can, which one of the labs you can execute. So, so if you just joined, actually, you want to go to this link. Let me repaste it in the window. You'll want to go to this link to be able to get access to the lab environment. And if you had not registered, you want to paste your email address inside the chat window so I can add you to the labs. So it's really important as you're going through the labs to basically read all the the documentation that comes in here, because it does actually cover a lot. And unfortunately, some of the really important steps are kind of not highlighted as much. But once you come in here, the first thing you want to do is activate Cloud Shell. And the link for activating Cloud Shell is right here. And then you'll be presented with this prompt here saying that you want to start up actual Cloud Shell, which you say, yes, you do want to start up Cloud Shell. And then the next step you want to do, and this is one that you want to do it in your regular browser window. This step right here, which is to access Google Analytics. This step you want to do in your current browser window and not in the one that you open the console or the in. So you just open up a regular window here and then just paste that URL. And you want to give an email address that you have access to, that you're able to receive email from, to be able to actually access Google Analytics, because this login for Google Analytics is how you'll be able to log into Google Analytics with this email. So we're going to give you access to essentially a demo environment for Google Analytics using this email address. So you don't have to actually use your own Google Analytics environment.
This is not going to mess up any like current Google Access account, and like
So
using my work email.
Yeah,
and I only have access to Google Analytics.
so you'll be able to go to the specific environment. Yeah, because
Okay.
the URL that actually includes a URL that goes to a specific environment. So yeah, you should be fine. So if you already have access to Google Analytics with another account, you can still use that.
Okay.
So the next major step is this one right here, which is actually where you open up the instant BQML form. And there's the link right there. And so you open this form and it's going to present you a bunch of options. I'm going to shrink this actually because the browser, I don't have a lot of real estate. So you're going to select this to run an app engine. And then you're going to want to copy this command. And if you go back to the instructions, it actually says, if you read through the instructions, it actually says, copy this command. So you'll want to actually run this command before you click yes in this tab here. So you just copy this command and then go into Cloud Shell and paste this command. So I'm going to kind of walk through the first steps of this, but then the rest I'm going to actually just do it. And then if you guys have any questions, and I'll have my screen still shared, you can ask me questions as I go through. So I won't be talking after I set up this initial thing. So it's going to take a few minutes to actually execute this, and you'll be prompted again. You can pick whichever region you want for this one. Not important. I'm gonna pick one that I know has lots of resources. Let me just go to US Central. Technically, if you were doing this for real, you'd probably pick the region that was closest to you latency wise, which for us would probably be US East 1, or maybe US East 4. Maybe US East 4 is actually closer to us, where I'm at right now.
I just did that and asking.
It's going to prompt you and you'll have to say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I know, depending on how your browser window is, you may not be able to read the whole thing. So it's actually creating a Cloud SQL instance. So that'll take a few minutes to actually complete. Are there any questions about any of this so far? Yeah, it takes quite a few minutes to run this first portion of it, but it's really important to make sure it completes before going on. What it's actually doing is it's spinning up a CRM Mint environment and also a BigQuery environment for you to be able to execute the labs. So like I said, if you have any questions or you have any problems running the labs, I mean, this is the initial part, just type a question in the chat or, just say something so we can take a look at it, okay? So once you've completed that part, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with event propensity. I like that one. And the event name, there's some additional options for this that are described. Actually, way down here. So when it comes to the event name, so right here where it asks for event name, the values for it are given back in the main window. So you see here, you can select a bunch of different marketing objectives. And it's purchase and repeat purchase do not require any configuration, but the other marketing objectives do require some configuration. So if I select event here, I have to select one of these following for the event name. So that's one of the few areas in this thing that you kind of It's really important to look at the documentation. The next thing they're asking for is the project ID, which you're not going to use your own project for your Google Ads. You want to use this environment here. So you want to copy that. Sorry, let me show you where I'm getting that from. If you go further down in this documentation, it says what the project ID, and you want to copy this. And that gets placed in this form here. And then the next value, you deployed CRM Mint in your project, and your project information is actually here. This is where your project ID is, so you can copy here and then paste it here. This value you can have, I'm just going to put my own prefix. The data stream, you want to select web, and I think you'd asked me, Gopi, about web on Android, but the stream we're going to select is the web one. Obviously, there's a way to get this to work with the other streams as well. And then the next couple of ones are going to require you to go to the measurement project, and that's how I was saying how the next one is the measurement ID. You're going to get that from our demo measurement environment. So you just copy this URL and paste it here. Because that email address you created will give you access to this demo environment. And then the measurement ID, once you click that link, property setting, and data streams. Right here. And click on this, and then you'll get the measurement ID here. And then you paste that in here. And a similar thing, the API secret. That's on that same page. And the value, the one that I recommend using is the one for Quick Labs. So it's going to be this one right here, one for Quick Labs. And you paste that here. And then the property setting. Where are you getting the error?
From Quick Labs. And then the error is entering the, so it's analytics.google.com/analytics and all that in the Google Analytics measurement ID in instant BQML.
Oh, so it's giving you a problem getting to the measurement ID?
That's correct. But let me take a screenshot.
Did you make sure to add yourself to the analytics demo environment? There was a few steps up here where, let me give you the link. Where this link right here, you had to enter in your logged in email address. And that, or
Sorry,
whichever,
you're sharing the screen that you're working in.
oh, no, I just, oh, let me show you where I got that from. So there was an instruction here which was to go to this site here.
Mhm.
So copy that and then paste that. Don't paste that in an incognito window. Paste that in your main browser window, and it'll
Yeah,
take
I had
you.
done that, and it gave me a success measure of that. So
Oh, so it did say that you have access to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting the same error.
And what's it? Do you guys have can you give me a screenshot of there? Actually, if you want to go ahead and present, show me what the error looks like.
just a moment.
Let me give you the ability to present.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's letting me send an image.
Okay. If you want to go ahead and present now. Yeah, Patrick, you should be able to present and show me the error you're seeing on screen. There you go. Oh no, that's not that. Yeah, that's not the measurement ID. So after when you there's a all right, let me show you where let me present again, and I'll show you how you get that. So
Yeah, and it looks like that might be an error with the instructions, unless I'm reading them wrong, because it did say to
yeah,
paste that in.
so once you ran the creation of the CRM Mint environment, right? All the way in you want to open, so you open this console. That's the one that asks you for the form. And then the next really important step, where's the link to? Sorry, I'm trying to remember where the link to the form that gives you all the. Oh, not this one. This link right here is the link to this is actually the link to that you need to paste in a browser window. So you want to copy this.
Gotcha. All right, I appreciate that. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then once you get into the window, you can then click here on the property settings. And then the first one you want to get is the property settings and click on data streams and then click here. And then this will be the measurement ID. So you actually have to you have to copy this URL, paste it in the window, not incognito, but your main browser window, or at least the window where you're logged in as the email address that you submitted for access to the instant BQML.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Apologies for just sort of apparently having skimmed over that.
No, it's a lot. It's a lot of instructions in here.
But when I do that, it's making me like the screen.
Oh, is this the email address that you used, or your login is the email address that you used?
No.
Yeah, you want to use the same email address that you used that you logged in with. And then you probably want to. Okay, this is oh wait, it took you to the right environment. Okay.
I just put save.
Yeah.
On this.
But you see, yeah, you're in the right environment. So then, if the quickest thing to do is probably just copy your URL and paste it since you're now in that.
In my account. Okay.
So just copy you can paste it in the same browser window or in any browser. Oh, it still takes you back.
Yeah.
All right, so because you're still logged in, you'll have to go into, how do you get to property settings? Hold on. Okay, you'll have to go to web stream details.
Who is that?
Great question. Maybe on the left-hand side. Admin, okay, under admin. Admin, and then property settings. So property settings is one, and data streams is where you get those. On the left-hand side.
This one.
No, data streams,
Oh, sorry.
right there. And then click on this,
Mhm.
and then copy the measurement ID. So if you already have like an analytics account, you may have to navigate to get to the, you'll have to make sure you switch to the account that you used for selecting the sample, the sample ads account that we have. So I would say probably you want to sign out of any account that you have ads with. It'll be a lot simpler to just use the login. We'll only have a browser logged into the account that you're using for the demo environment. And then the property ID is going to be here under. So the API secrets is in the same window as that, and then the property ID is under property settings. And then this is the property ID. And the location oh, let me show you. So I pasted the property ID. The location you want to say is US. And then the frequency, there's actually the actual example ads account is already set to daily and streaming, so you can use that.
And sorry, where I'm getting hung up next is the Google Analytics API secret.
Okay.
So, again,
That's
like,
yeah,
sorry.
it's going to be on that same screen where let me show you. It's going to be on that same data stream screen. So you go to data stream, click here, and this is a measurement ID, and then the API secret is going to be right here.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And then you're going to select the Quick Labs one. So my apologies, folks, because the truth is that they've changed the analytics console a lot, and they change it quite a lot. So that's why the instructions seem like they're kind of a little bit vague, but you'll be able to figure it out once you get to some of the main screen. All right, so once you get, I'm going to select daily and streaming, and then you have to add this permissions to this account, which it gives you here, to this demo account in Google Analytics admin. And the way you add that is under this section right here where it says property access management. You just want to add a user. Select the email address that you copied from over here. And give that account editor permissions. And then click add. And then once you do that, click yes here. Now, you only have to do this. I forget what the actual one that you would need to actually click this to actually do something for the next box. But since you're using our demo account, and if you're using, because you're using a separate GA4 account than the one that your project that you're using for the demo, you can just say yes here. Now, since I'm doing the event propensity one, I do have to download a training model and a prediction pipeline. So a training pipeline and a prediction pipeline. But if you some of the other options you had selected for all the way up here in terms of what type of model you wanted to look at, they wouldn't require you to select that. So I'm going to go ahead and download my training pipeline, and I'm going to download my predictive pipeline.
Just one call out on the analytics environment. I noticed when we were adding that email address permissions, it seems like it's retaining the emails of other folks who've used this training. I'm wondering if maybe that's something that might want to be addressed on the Google side in the future.
Oh, that's a great feedback, actually. Let me keep a note of that, actually. It's great feedback. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, so I've downloaded those two. The next step I can do now is to go to the CRM Mint environment, and you can get the link for that here. If you still had your window open, you can get the link to the CRM Mint environment. And you just click it, and it will give you a screen that looks like this. And then I can import both the pipelines, which I downloaded before. So I just import by template. This one, import by template, this other one. So now I can execute. So now that I've imported, so I just clicked here for import by template and imported both the files that I downloaded before. I can go ahead and run the training pipeline. So show of hand, how many folks, or maybe virtual hands with the hand function, how many folks have gotten to the point of running their pipeline? Okay, cool. Awesome.
Thanks for the help.
No worries. That's why we're here. So I won't lie to you, sometimes this randomly fails, and we can just, this second part right here, the good news is that we can actually start it to run again, and usually it'll correct itself. It does say it takes about 10 minutes to run this pipeline, by the way. So don't be surprised if it takes a little bit. Once that step actually runs, you can actually go to BigQuery and see some of the model information already. And so we're gonna go through. I'm just gonna go through like a basic running of the event propensity stuff. But you can try some of the other different model types and then actually go and BigQuery. And I'll make sure to email to all of y'all this list of a bunch of different types of queries that you can run against the data once it's been set up inside your BigQuery environment in this test environment. Obviously, the way QuickLabs works, you actually have to spin up the whole environment to actually go and run these queries because this is not a long running environment. It will terminate after the 3-hour timeline. But, you know, if you don't get a chance to run those queries today, you can spin up this environment again, like say tomorrow or something like that. And I'll have it running till through the weekend so that you can have a chance to try the labs.
While we're waiting for everything to kind of finish running, I wonder if now would be a good time to ask a couple of questions.
Sure. Perfect time.
All right, cool. So really just had two, and they're kind of related. So one is just especially for the stock BigQuery ML models, is there documentation for each of the models in terms of kind of what methodology is being used?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty. When you go into the console, you can see there's a lot of in context documentation for the different services. So if you go to, let me show what I'm talking about. You can go and there's an entire section where you can go to the documentation. There's also a bunch of architecture guides that go over architectures for things you can do with BigQuery, which I think there's a stuff that covers BigQuery now. But if you go to the general BigQuery documentation, that link here, you can filter it by BigQuery. and you can, and one of the things they do is a lot of our documentation is always aligned with quick starts. And these, so you'll see right here, there'll be these guides that go introduction to BigQuery ML. And then there's a subsection that goes into the models. And then there's this tutorial. So there's a lot of tutorial. A lot of our documentation, basically the first place you land are these tutorials that basically talk you through how to do everything. And then there's tutorials on the different models that tell you. So there's more documentation on the models. And the tutorials are really great because they give you hands-on instructions of how to actually make use of the models. And if you want more details on the actual models themselves,
Wondering if that's what the link, it looks like k-means there is highlighted. What does that go to?
yeah, so that
All right,
goes
well,
no, I'm trying to find something like describes it in the midst, because the tutorial basically tells you how to make use of the model and some background on the model. But I guess you would want some more documentation. I guess it does kind of talk about that. A little detail on, yeah, to be honest with you, if you go through these tutorials, you'll get a great understanding of the model, because it just, by virtue of the fact that it kind of breaks everything down and says, hey, and then if you want you see those links like the one you saw, that gives you kind of like the theoretical underpinning of it. And then the other link in the support thing here, it gets into architecture guides. And if you go to the architecture guides, you can actually search. Yeah, it actually you'll see some examples of how some customers have solved other problems using BigQuery ML. So hopefully that answers your question.
definitely. I think that's a great starting point there. And then the second question, which is a little bit downstream of that, is just kind of understanding the implementation of this. So it really comes down to when we're using the BigQuery ML language, so we're writing in the custom SQL there, has Google built their own versions of each of these methodologies, or is it basically a wrapper on top of, say, an open source library that's actually performing the calculations?
Oh, yeah. So those models are running on our infrastructure, and there are some customizations to them, but a lot of those models are based on open source models. And a lot of, for example, TensorFlow is used for several of those models. And so that's open source. So you can download TensorFlow and do what you want with it yourself. But there are some I think for some of the models, there's some customizations for running them in BQML, but these are mostly based on open source models. And then you can customize, you can use your own models with AutoML. It gives you, and then you can also export these models and use them externally to BigQuery ML as well.
Okay. But I shouldn't understand this as essentially the BigQuery ML SQL being an abstraction layer on top of, say, Python in all cases. Or like, in the case of, say, Hadoop and having one of the, like Mahout on top of that, for example. It's that Google has actually written the code that's running the actual procedures for a number of these, if not all of them.
Yes. But the model itself is something, typically it's based on an open source model, but sometimes there's some customizations to the model, but you can actually export the model and make use of it outside of BQML. And
Okay.
you can import custom models as well.
Yeah, and that's helpful, and I appreciate that. I just kind of wanted to get a sense of, again, kind of what's it doing, and is it slightly variable from what I might be using otherwise?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is kind of like the harness, which is like how do you put in parameters and stuff like that. That's stuff that's handled by us in BigQuery ML. But the model itself, the actual model, is something that you can make use of external to it.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, appreciate it.
No problem. So it looks like my training model is done. So I can actually spin up my propensity model. So the instructions here talk about setting up dry runs. That's something you can do to be able to do estimates for how expensive it would be to run training and inference. We're not going to do dry runs here, but it actually the instructions. Ooh, this is what I was looking at. Instructions here go over how to do dry runs. So let's actually run the prediction pipeline. That's the next. And so, like I said, I'm doing the events propensity one. So let me go back to my pipelines. And since I've run the training one, I can actually run the prediction one now. So it actually goes over all the steps that it's doing inside of this propensity model. And you can actually, every time you run this propensity model, you can actually see in real time, because it's actually inputting sample data, you can actually see the results of it in real time. So it gives you a link to go to a real-time view of the actual analytics data. So every time I run that, you can actually see it change over here in terms of impressions on the web properties that it's actually tracking. And since I located my environment in USC's 4, it'll say it's coming from the US. Now, if you had, it's actually kind of cool. If you use this global view, it'll show you where the data is coming from. And so as I'm running this prediction pipeline, if I see, now you see how many events it's registered and users. If I run that model again, here, the prediction again, it's going to update the amount of users that you see here in real time. And that's just because the model I was choosing to use is the events one. So it enters sample information for events, which is like, customer hits the website. So it shouldn't take this long for my prediction pipeline to run. And then once it's run, if I come back over here to this real-time dashboard, you'll see my values update. So like I said, I chose the events model for it, but there's a bunch of different options in this lab for which model you want to look at. You go further back up here, you'll see that it gives you the instructions for a bunch of different other marketing objectives. I chose event, but you could do purchase, repeat purchase, page, product, and churn. And since over here I ran prediction again, when I go back to real time, I will now see an increase. Refresh this page. I should see an increase in the users. Yep. I realize it's more than me running this, so it's gone up by a small amount, but there's other people running it too. So that's pretty much it if you were to run the event processing one. And then you can see it added, it gives you a link to see the update to the page definitions. Since I'm running the event one, you can see it'll add. See how it added my GC Henry page definitions. And then it also added some audiences. You see how it added some high, low, medium. So my apologies. I am not very well versed on advertising games, so I have no idea what some of this stuff does. I just know that that's one of the things that you're looking for tracking.
That's okay. Yeah, we have ads and gaps, but they have different ads that kind of in Google Sense now.
Are you guys on GA360 yet, or are you still on the GA? Are you on the previous GA?
No, I have not called.
Yeah, I think you guys are on the previous GA. I remember the last time I talked to you guys about it. So that's pretty much it, at least for the event stuff. Let me try to get some sample queries. Actually, since I'm here, I can pull up the example queries that you can use against BigQuery environment to see. And now that you've actually set up the models and trained them, you can actually run some.
So some additional questions from me, just
Sure.
on this example. So in this case, we essentially selected from a set of types of models that we're trying to build, and then kind of went all the way through. For instant BQML, would it be fair to say that it sort of relies on the base fundamental Google Analytics in order to remove all the configuration of the other elements there? I'm just wondering, like, if I wanted to define a custom action, is there an option to do that in?
Yeah. So the examples for Incident BQML can work with a bunch of different ad providers, but the example they show in these labs was using GA360 for analytics and for ads data. But you can leverage BQML to do these for a bunch of different ad providers. And then there's ways we could actually do this workshop. The team who did this instant BQML have customized it for a bunch of different ad vendors, but the process can work with different ones. So we could have done one specifically on, let's say you were doing Facebook ads and a different analytics platform, you could have done it with that. And at a high level, you can leverage BQML with whatever data you want inside of BigQuery. So I had one customer who they were getting Amazon ads from, for example, and they were able to do the BigQuery import in from Amazon ads, and then use BQML against that. So BQML is because it basically is a quick way of getting predictive marketing analytics stood up, but nothing's stopping you from leveraging different analytics platforms and different ads sources. And that's what I'm saying is that you can find, like, for example, if you're trying to do this with Facebook ads, there's templates for how to do it. And then you'll just have to figure out how to do your models and then how to do dashboarding for it based off of that.
Yeah. And sorry, I think my question wasn't specific enough. So I think my question is more, are those cases that you cited? So it makes sense to me that those would be sort of configurable within BQML as a sort of SQL adjacent language. But today we were just saying instant BQML. Is there any customization possible in instant BQML?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is that this example was using instant BQML with Google Ads and Google Analytics, but there is instant BQML available with, say, Facebook ads and different analytics platforms.
So for those, would we just load a different set of pipeline?
Yeah, exactly.
And Google would provide those?
Yeah, so I can get in touch with, I know the example they give us one is just for Google Analytics and 360, but I actually, in the documentation, I can actually find it for different platforms, like, for example, using the old GA4. So they do support different analytics platforms. I can tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think what I'm getting to is for just those pipelines that are predefined, that's something that essentially a customer would receive, and then it's just a question of loading them, implementing them for the Google Analytics account or whatever the data is that we're pulling from BigQuery. But it's not that they are necessarily user configurable. For user configurability, then we're over on the BQML side, correct?
Right. But I'm trying to see if there's built-in BQML. So it's actually a GitHub project, and let me see. So you can actually check out the instant BQML. Here's the GitHub project for it. I'll paste it in the window. And I know we do support the GA360 and Google Ads, but there's ones in here. There should be a way to do this with other sources. I'll track that down as a question, is in terms of how do you do it with other analytics platform as well as other ad sources, right?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think my question is, it's less, do we have a specific use case at this point? I can't answer that, and more just kind of understanding what are the capabilities and what's configurable within different products within kind of the Google Analytics data science machine learning options.
Yeah. And like you saw if you look in this page, you see all the different models, and use cases that it supports.
Yeah.
And then I think there's some additional ones too, because it actually, there's instructions here for how to do things like conversions and tracking conversions. So that's something Instant BQML can do, but it's not, this lab doesn't even touch on that. But all the way at the bottom of the lab instructions, you'll see some links that show some additional things that you can do once you've spun up the BQML environment, like this lab instructs you to. If you go all the way to the bottom, it talks about things like conversion events, audience remarketing, conversion values for audience segments. And that just references some different things you can. And this is also still specifically for Google Ads. But I know this team has built this platform to work with other sources and for other use cases. So that's all I have in terms of the lab. So I'll leave the lab environment open till next week. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, you can reach out to me. My email address is really easy to have, but you can also ping us via the RSV page if you came through that for registering as well. And yeah, this was awesome. I'm glad you guys gave me an excuse to come to the Rosella office, because I feel like I come to a playground. And unfortunately, if you guys are not, the ones who are not in office with me, I won't be able to share some of the slide, but I'll leave some extra stuff for some of the other Revzilla folks.
Yeah, and for the Revzilla folks that are on, if you leave it with me, they can track me down when
We'll do that. We'll do that. But thank you guys so much for spending the time. Hopefully you guys did go through the lab and you see some of the value with it. I definitely recommend, I'll try to find that they gave us a list of queries that you could execute directly against BigQuery to see run some of the inference yourself and modify the training and such. I'll try to find that and email it to all the attendees to this meeting so you guys can see some of the other queries you can execute, so you can see more behind the scenes of what's happening with BQML. And I do have that question from you, Patrick, to figure out what some of the customizations, what are the other use cases it can use Instant BQML for. There is a lot more use cases, but they only cover a few in this lab. And then I got your comment about the open access to the admin screen. I'll definitely report that in, because that is definitely concerning.
No worries. And thanks, and looking forward to the follow-up there. Thanks for helping me kind of get my head around, again, kind of what the additional offerings are in this space from Google.
No worries. I'm really glad to have you guys. Hopefully you picked up something from this that's of use to you. And yeah, we'll be signing off now, and I'll share the recording with you guys if you're interested in having it. And then we'll just see you guys later. And there will be, I think they do record an on-demand thing. It'll be available on the RSVP site as well. And you guys hopefully will make use of this BQML stuff. It's pretty exciting. And then, I know it's not as exciting. My kid talks to me about BARD all the time. It's not as exciting as BARD, but it is how the business world works. And it is a use case for machine learning today, not tomorrow.
Well, I will say, at least for the folks on the analytics team, we're plenty interested in this beyond just sort of BARD and ChatGPT and those types of products. So there are definitely a lot of use cases within classical machine learning and data science we're interested in.
Yeah, awesome. This is awesome. Yeah, I think BQML is a great way to get started. And you'll one of the things I love about it is a quick way to demonstrate that ML is actually a useful thing. So it's a quick way. It's not Roblox. All right, guys. You guys have a wonderful afternoon. And like I said, I'll leave some swag here for some of the Revzilla folks. And we'll see you out there again.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.